6 o'clock, I'll call the work session to order. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Soulsby? Here. Counselor Savage? Here. Counselor Fleck?
Here.
Counselor Stennett? Counselor Irvin?
Here.
Counselor Roberts?
Here.
Mayor Gowing?
Here. And just let everyone know, we do not take public comment during the work session. This is just for our work session. You're welcome to be here. We just don't take comment. Item 3 is homeless shelter RFP discussion. Mr. Myers.
So you have before you the RFP that the city attorney and staff put together, and our city attorney should be joining us shortly online as well. She was not able to be here tonight, but she was going to join us virtually. It is put together and drawn from a sample of Lane County RFPs for similar services, as well as some other communities too. And then it is adapted to fit our purchasing ordinance and rules that have been adopted by the city. So we'd like to start by going through and talking about the various parts of it, if there are any questions associated with it. Most of the comments and questions I think that you're going to have are going to be in section 1 and 2. And when you get to sections 3 and 4, those are pretty much the technical language associated with our purchasing ordinance. Section 5 and others are the actual contracts at the end. So you may want to look at the contracts and see if there's anything that you want to do with those as well. Section 4, there may be some things you might want to look at as well, though, that deal with evaluations and how to evaluate the proposals when they come in, because we do have to include that in the RFP. So we'll start right off at the beginning of it, and you came in person. So she's coming in person. She's not virtually here. So if you have any questions dealing with the format or the procedures associated with the actual purchasing procedures, Carrie can answer those as well. Section 1 is where we'll start. I don't think the basic advertisement, I don't think there's anything there that unless there's something you want to add or talk about there. Basically it's just saying, hey, this is being proposed, and turn them in here, and the specifics associated with the how to do it. Section 1, we do the introduction, and we have background and contract requirements. The introduction is just basically what we're seeking for is a contractor that's experienced in literal homelessness, and to address part of our homelessness strategy by providing staffing a low barrier emergency shelter located at 2205 Highway 99 in Cottage Grove. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they must meet OHA rules and requirements for emergency shelters around safety, sanitation, and privacy. We didn't put in the HUD rules because we're not using any HUD money, so we went with the state rules on that. Then just some background associated with the building and the property, and how it's being renovated and what's there on the property. And the contract requirements. The contractor must operate the program independently and not as an agent of the city. The proposals will be accepted from a consortium of agencies. Only one proposal per proposal consortium is allowed. So if a group of organizations want to submit an application, they can, but it can only be one. All furnishings, equipment, and materials purchased with funds from this contract will belong to the city and shall be returned to the city at the end of the contract in as good of condition as received, reasonable wear and tear expected. So that's the basic introduction. Not much there. Any questions?
Councilor Roberts.
Thank you, sir. Richard, it says here the property has room for over 33 shelters. What is the final number? Do we know what that is?
We're only putting 33 on, but okay. You could probably fit a few more in there, but we're not going to put more.
Okay.
Because we don't, part of the situation is we don't want more than 40. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilor Soulsby.
I have a few questions. First of all, Carrie, I was wondering if you got the question that I asked, the definition of low barrier, if indeed that was one of the reasons why we went to a vote on and included low barrier, is we were told that we had to do a low barrier, and what exactly that meant, because you were saying that we had to allow people in that were intoxicated or on drugs, or and if that, and I didn't see that in the low barrier definition. All I saw was the religious on
So we
a homeless camp.
tried to address it in here. Do you remember, Richard, exactly where that explanation is? I know it's in the scope of work.
Page 7.
Page 7, thanks. So what we developed, okay, so 2.6, clearly Richard should be delivering this explanation. But so what is, the way it's described is that there won't be barriers to entrance, but there can be requirements to remain. And that is what's outlined here. So, may not deny entry to the project based on any of the following criteria: current or past substance use, presence of mental health disorders, criminal background or history, and I'm summarizing.
Is this what the actual law says, or is this, so if we are made to put in a low barrier site, the law says that we have to have a low barrier?
There is no definition of low barrier.
Okay. So that was not my understanding, how it was explained to me at the last council meeting. I was told that a low barrier included that we would have to allow someone in and that is using drugs, and that we could not prohibit entrance, and that we had to be in compliance with Martin versus Boise and with HB 3115, that we had to make it low barrier. And I was under the understanding, and I'm not sure if you guys were as well, that is what low barrier meant, was that was a requirement, because that was always a sticking point, I know, for myself and a few other counselors.
Right. So there's a misunderstanding here. It is, the law doesn't require you to do anything. You don't have to do anything. I'm sorry if that is not understood. If you want to be able to take measures in your public spaces, then you want to provide alternative shelter.
So did I not hear that we wouldn't be in compliance with Martin versus Boise? Because I believe that's what I was told, if we did not do low barrier.
No, Martin v. Boise doesn't require you to do anything. What it says is you can't move people out of public spaces. So you can't manage your public space unless there's alternative shelter available. And then HB 31, requires you, so the only thing you're required to do is take provisions out of your code that provide those that are unconstitutional under the Eighth Amendment. So the question then for the council, the policy question, not a legal question, the policy question is, what kind of alternative shelter, if any, do you want to provide so that you can manage your public space? And the policy decision of some, not all, was we want to provide alternative shelter. So if you're going to provide alternative shelter, then it needs to be low barrier, as discussed here, in order to give you the most options to manage the rest of your public spaces. That is where a low barrier comes in. There's no legal statutory or case law definition of it. It is an interpretation of the case law and the statute to give you the most options.
That's not the way I heard it the first time. Probably the second time as well. I heard that we had to do a barrier or we would be non-compliant.
What I heard.
Well, my apologies.
Counselor Fleck?
So, and it does actually spell out that it can't be religious. It does talk about some barriers. So I think if I'm understanding you correctly, this is our best path to not be sued if we want to limit folks in our other spaces, public spaces. And so this is a test of, okay, we've provided this opportunity, folks can take it or they cannot be in other spaces, and if that opportunity is full, what are the other options available to them? So what we are doing is limiting our legal, or actually I guess it'd be civil risk as a city by not allowing barriers in this, because in, what was it, the grants pass, was that Blake? I'm trying to remember.
Blake
Where
versus Grants.
Right, where they made it so restrictive that folks were not able to utilize that service. That was then also deemed that created barriers that substantially limited that option, and so therefore it wasn't a viable. So while there may not be specifics on what barriers are acceptable or not, the more barriers you have, the higher your risk of not meeting the definition under the law, which is still being determined.
Right.
That's
well,
my
I just want to
understanding.
be really clear, though, since it's been understood that I said there was a definition. There is no definition. We have case law discussion about what was an alternative shelter and what wouldn't be an alternative shelter.
I appreciate that, but I was under the understanding there was a definition, and that's why I asked for a second opinion, is I was that strong that I was given a definition, and that definition was low barrier, which had to do with drug use. And so that's why I'm passionate about this, because obviously I don't feel like this is a good solution for our city, that I don't think there's a lot of reason for people to get help if, and I do want some accountability. And for reference, Mr. Flack, Councilor Flack, the conclusion of Blake versus Grants Pass said, the holding in this case does not say that Grants Pass must allow homeless camps to be set up at all times in public parks. Just like Martin, this holding is in no way dictates to local government that it must provide sufficient shelter for homeless or allow anyone who wishes to sit or lie sleep in the streets at any time, at any place. And so it actually goes on to say that Grants Pass would retain large toolbox for regulating public space without violating the 8th Amendment. And so they were not actually penalized there. They just couldn't fine Blake for sitting. So just to clarify. I also have, thank you. I also have another question as far as it does say that this would be independent contractors that would be running it and not an agent of the city. And I would like a little clarification on what exactly that means, since I know that there is sometimes a fine line between employees and independent contractors. When the city owns the land and the city is directly paying for the services being performed by the contractors at the camp, the residents do not pay for contracted services. And so if anything were to happen, I know they have to have their own insurance, and I just want to know what the city's liabilities would be with that, since we can't run background checks, or, you know, if that were the case, so that is a concern of mine as far as an independent contractor versus employee of the city and agent of the city.
I think you're in a better position liability-wise to have a independent contractor who is independently insured, who is required to defend and indemnify and hold the city harmless than you would be to have your city employees directly operating the facility.
But it also means we have a lot less control over how, if it's going sideways, we cannot legally step in because we may have some liabilities there if we do.
No. So as long as the scope of work is clearly established, what you can't do with an independent contractor is directly control the independent contractor's employees. You don't want to, there's a 10-part test that's, they're an independent contractor if X, Y, and Z, all of these different things. But as long as you have a very clear scope of work and your independent contractor, regardless of how their employees are performing, is not meeting your standard, your scope of work, then you have remedies such as termination, breach, damages, etc. So you would have a breach of contract claim. You just wouldn't be directing their individual employees. And you wouldn't want to. We don't want you in that position.
Councilor Roberts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as low barrier independent contractor, if somebody does overdose, the city cannot be held responsible in any way?
So the city can always be named in a lawsuit,
Oh, yeah.
but if the city is named in a lawsuit for a damage that occurred as a result of the liability of the independent contractor, then the independent contractor has to defend and indemnify the city. So while you could be named in the suit, that's with a lot of jargon, but their attorney would need to defend the city. Any court decision, any award that a judge entered against the city, the independent contractor would be required to pay contractually.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Irvin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Along the lines of the definition of low barrier, as you're describing it, I see a sliding scale anywhere from what was deemed unconstitutional under Boise to something like we have before us in this RFP. And I understand that case law hasn't really defined it much beyond that. Is there, since a lot of the discussion prior that went into the approval of the plan had to do with barriers, what can you tell us as far as what are the highest level of barriers that you could recommend that would still, I guess that you'd be comfortable recommending? Is this the standard that has been put together in this RFP? Is that the highest risk that you're recommending, which is, in my reading, basically zero barriers? Are there some that we discussed that you think could work without putting the city at an unreasonable risk of lawsuit?
Well, I can tell you that this is based on Lane County's language, and Lane County consults with experts in the area. I did not craft this language based on my review of the law. We utilize those examples. So I don't have a legal opinion other than I rely on others' interpretation of what low barrier should be as defensible. The more entities that are using the same level of what constitutes low barrier, to me, it seems most defensible. Anything where you are testing out a theory of, well, I think this might be within the boundaries of the law, is is your choice, but it would be a magnet for challenge because the advocates on the other side would want to support a uniform definition of what constitutes a constitutional alternative shelter. So low barrier really isn't used in the case law. It's just that we have examples of what doesn't constitute an alternative shelter.
And those are the religious test and the objectively reasonable standard, is that correct?
Right, right. I mean, that it's open regularly, that it is located nearby, that it accepts, that it doesn't require religious service. It's kind of a common understanding that it also doesn't eliminate families, pets, and that it takes those in need as they are. What you do with them after that is less, is more discretionary.
And since it's a pretty relevant item in this, the objectively reasonable test, looks like there's some for use of force for police officers, but the one that I was seeing was basically if you take a test of a hypothetical reasonable person, what they would find reasonable. I wonder if that's still pretty ambiguous to me too. Is there anything in your experience that you can kind of put more contours around that? Would somebody in a mental illness state be considered an objectively reasonable person? Would somebody under the influence at the time be considered objectively reasonable?
What we have is the legislature's direction for 3115 that is, isn't yet in place, but the legislature didn't use objectively reasonable to any person, like as in tort law, like it sounds like you're referring to. They said objectively reasonable from the perspective of a homeless individual. So that changes the pool of what is, I guess, not normal, objectively reasonable from the perspective of a homeless individual.
Do you know if that has anything to do with, I'm assuming that refers to the Oregon Revised Statute that defines homelessness that we referenced, point 2 and 4.
HB 3115. It's that.
Right. If you're saying that it refers to the position of a homeless person, do you know if that homeless is defined in that when it's saying that?
No, it's not.
And do you know if that has if it has to do with specifically the state of that person as they are homeless, or their mental state as well?
It would, in all other circumstances, it would take mental, physical, everything about that individual into account. So while we don't have a court interpretation of 3115, we know that a court wouldn't read into the legislature's language some distinction that isn't there. They wouldn't say, well, they're only talking about their physical needs, they're not talking about their emotional or mental state.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm being clear about the direction the question's coming from. It's try to understand before we make some RFP what the parameters are for objectionably reasonable, since that seems to be the standard set in House Bill 3115. I mean, I would understand that this RFP is an attempt at doing that. Is that correct? So there has to be some standard. And if you're saying it's just an appeal to what's already been used before in Lane County, do we have anything beyond that says, well, this is how they came up with that, that's how they measured why they felt this was objectively reasonable?
One of the parameters of why the county has used low barrier, and we've put low barrier in here, is every barrier you create, that means that person can't be in the shelter, but it makes the shelter not an alternative shelter, and they are then eligible to be in the public places again. So if you take out of the low barrier and say, in the low barrier, you cannot come in intoxicated or under the influence of drugs, you've now put those people that are intoxicated and under the influence of drugs eligible to be in the public place.
I guess a question on that, is it against the law to be publicly intoxicated?
I don't think so. It depends on what they're doing.
I don't know if it was.
I think that'd be an Oregon revised statute. Public
Yeah.
intoxication.
You'd have to be doing something to create a problem associated with that. And
Counselor,
legally, under the state of Oregon now, you can be in possession too.
Counselor Fleck.
So as I'm sitting here thinking, I assume because this precludes our agency from applying, I don't need to declare a potential conflict anymore. Is that correct?
Say that again. I'm
So
sorry.
this
Counselor.
RFP precludes any officer of this city being, applying for this RFP, which means that community sharing is no longer eligible to apply for this. I assume I no longer have to declare a potential conflict.
I recommend always declaring. There is no harm in declaring, and it would be helpful to explain on the record why then you have previously declared potential conflicts of interest and why you're deciding under this RFP, at least as it's written, which could change,
Okay.
why you don't believe that potential conflict exists anymore.
So I work for Community Sharing Program. We do basic needs assistance for many folks in town, including the unhoused. We did run the warming shelter, so there is the potential conflict to apply for this RFP. That being said, this as it's written precludes our agency because of my status on this council from applying, and our agency has no intention on doing so. Thank you.
And given that, that's not even a potential conflict of interest, but that clarifies why Councilor Fleck can participate in the conversation and vote.
Thank you. Actually, since I have the chair, it's for, so I guess I'm also, and this actually is kind of a good example of why our agency is not interested in this. This actually, some of this takes me a little bit by surprise. So Community Sharing runs a program called Home Tenant-Based Assistance, which is to get folks who are unhoused back into housing. It's a HUD program, and one of the expectations is that folks are working on a self-sufficiency plan. And if they are not working towards that, they actually can be taken out of the program. And so while I totally expect low barrier to get folks into a program, I would hope that once we have the motivation of shelter, that we would getting folks working towards, whatever their needs are, whether that's, psychological evaluation and help, whether that's addiction services. Now, that being said, we've put a 4-month window on this, so that's a pretty narrow window to get case management involved. Our program operates for a year and can be renewed for a second. And so certainly it's a much more involved case management. But I guess I share some of our other counselors' concerns that I would hate to see folks in housing without, us actually working towards maybe transitioning them into a program like the one our agency operates.
So maybe look at section 2.3 and let's talk about if that needs to be clarified or more resources listed as something that is an expectation that this independent contractor would provide, or put individuals utilizing the services in touch with.
So as I'm reading through all of this, it's talking about what the contractor is expected to do, not what the client is expected to do.
Correct. And I think that makes sense for an RFP because it isn't establishing rules for your facility. It's providing guidance and the scope of work for what you want your service provider to do.
And I guess I just want to say, for the record, I've interacted with folks from Carry It Forward, and I'm totally supportive that they know what they're doing, and that will actually make a huge difference. But that had actually caught my attention on page 7, the refusal to participate, and I'm glad you clarified that that is for getting into the program. But I suppose once they're in the program, I hope the expectation is that they're going to be working with the the staff on site and or outside services that are that they're referred to as well. And I'm not sure how to put that in a way that makes sense, because like I said, I actually don't have experience running this type of operation.
Well, maybe if there isn't more to be added to 2.3 that anybody can direct staff on, consider the 2.9 on page 9, performance outcomes and reporting. So if there's any kind of objective outcome that you're hoping to achieve, or that you're hoping your service provider will achieve in working with the residents.
Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Councilor Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Fleck. My understanding and reading of it was that there is no requirement in this RFP that anybody that's staying at the facilities would participate in any program, any way, shape, or form. Is it your assertion that there should be some requirement?
I do think that the performance outcomes do outline the expectations, and if in fact nobody was making any improvement, I think that these performance outcomes would be one of those reasons that a contract could be terminated if those outcomes. I know in my programs, which are very similar, if we're not hitting our outcomes, that they certainly, we could change vendors, or we could change the program. So I mean, I think that I do think there is something there. I mean, I think that if they're not meeting them, then clearly they have not motivated the clients to get to a better place.
Councilor Roberts.
So then, how do we as a council review the service provider to these numbers? Would it be yearly?
Well, we won't. That'd be that's an administrative thing. Our role here is policy, and so it would not be our role to evaluate. That would be the city staff's job. But they certainly, I believe, would be reporting back at least annually to the city council on the successes based on this, and I'll be honest with you, we have the same expectation of 6 months after and 12 months after. Let me tell you what a challenge that is, because our housing programs have that same requirement. It's a huge challenge finding folks that period of time later.
We talked a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, but I do think actually the framework, certainly provides that the expected outcome, even while it doesn't specifically talk about client expectations.
Councilor Soulsby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, my experience with contracts is I like everything in writing, and it's as far as expectations, I feel like this is, if there are going to be expectations, I don't see them here. And this looks like to me that they don't have to participate, and if they don't want to participate, we give what's called a warm handoff, which is a nice way of asking them to leave. And I don't see how that's doing us any good. Honestly, we're creating the shelter which is supposedly to keep people out of our parks, but if they don't want to participate and they don't make progress, then we're going to ask them to leave anyway. And then there's not even it's so confusing to me. It says transition to permanent housing option in less than 120 days whenever possible. However, there is no specific limitation on length of stay. And so, I mean, everything is so vague that to me, this would leave it all up to city staff and this organization to pretty much run it as they please, and they tell us that we voted on it and gave them the go-ahead, and it's out of our hands. And this is our one opportunity to outline what we truly want and get it clear, because this is vague. And the whole thing of putting it for 5 years too is a mistake in my opinion. I would never vote for that. This would be a trial period only in my book, and then reevaluate how it's going, not give somebody a contract for 5 years and say run with it. Without, I mean, I understand that we would reevaluate it every year, but still our contract is there for 5, and getting out of a contract is,
I was going to say,
well, it's 3 years with a 2-year extension, correct?
No, it can be reviewed based on performance, so
Okay.
it would have to be going through the renewal process.
Okay.
It's not just automatic.
All right, well, it still seems like 3 years is a long time.
Can we
So,
do it
I
for?
just want to clarify that a couple of points. So first off, everything can be clarified to the extent we receive direction to that effect. 2.4, the length of stay that you were reading from, the final sentence of that first paragraph does say permanent or long-term stays are not permitted. And therefore you could, if you wanted to, define what long-term stay is.
It says no specific limitation on length of stay, and then permanent or long stays are not permitted. So it's kind of contradictory there.
Unless you define long-term stay, which you could do. And then as Richard had pointed out, it's a 3-year term, but because 6.1 allows termination for convenience, you don't have to wait for a breach. You wouldn't have to prove breach. You just have to give 30 days notice if you wanted to terminate.
there was,
Councilor Fleck.
oh, I'm sorry. I think Councilor was first.
If I may,
Yeah.
on that point, do we run into any issues with eviction? Like, is it after 30 days, it becomes their home and they have renters' rights, or how?
Fortunately, I'm sorry to cut you off. I don't mean to cut you off, but since I think I know where you're going, I'm just going to reassure you that the legislation regarding transitional and emergency shelter provided by a city or other entities does not constitute a landlord-tenant relationship under ORS 90.
Okay, that triggers
Specifically.
another question. Then you used 2 words there: transitional housing and what was that?
Emergency shelters.
Emergency shelters. I know that low barrier doesn't have a definition, but do those have a definition that relate to barriers?
No, there's not a lot of legislative guidance, but this is set up as an emergency shelter. This is taking advantage of both of those.
Well, that would be the question. Where do we move out of emergency shelter if we put additional stipulations on?
It's a pretty broad definition. I mean, emergency shelter is defined.
Like, could the Eugene mission be considered emergency shelter?
I don't know, probably because it preceded the legislation, so it wasn't set up pursuant to the legislation. But I don't think that it establishes a landlord-tenant relationship.
Thanks.
Councilor Fleck.
I kind of forgot my point, but I do actually like the idea Councilor Soulsby is proposing, that we maybe put a year as a maximum stay. That's the length of our HTBA program. I think that's a reasonable amount of time for somebody to be making substantial progress. I will say, I think there's huge opportunity here for folks to transition from this into programs like the one I'm talking about. We've had real success problems because we're moving somebody straight from homelessness into housing, and we've had a lot of challenges, getting folks back into the mentality. As an example, we had one person who was hoarding and ended up, and in that program, if the landlord evicts them, they're out. Whether our program, decides to do that or not, a tougher discussion. But one of the huge challenges around that program is our vacancy rate for rentals in this town. It is just really, really challenging to place anybody in housing. And I'm really hopeful that with our MUPTI and the increased units that are going in, that'll change. But I see, a very huge opportunity. So you talked about the warm handoff. The warm handoff is helping folks go from this into our program or another one that's similar that actually gets folks back into stable housing. And that, I think, should be the goal, both for the client and for us as a city. I do think that's, but I certainly would support adding that maximum time of a year, absolutely.
And do we have to start with a 3-year contract, or could we do less?
You can do less, but, a year, is that really going to give enough to get things up and going well, to show some results?
But 2 years.
Yeah.
Councilor
And
Fleck.
I was going to suggest maybe 2 years is because that's the funding that we've established. And there was a comment, I don't remember where I read it, whether it was in social media or if it was in some of the stuff presented to us about how we're stuck in a contract. All of them say based on funding. So even though my current contracts with the county are 4 years, if next week all of a sudden there's no money, my contract is reduced or cut. So that's a given, and it's written. I've seen that language in this contract. So I do think, though, that going with 2 also helps us work and motivates us to look at secure, funding and evaluate if we're actually saving money as a community.
Councilor Roberts.
So Councilor Fleck, you're saying 2 years with a review after 1?
Well, I think we get a report regardless. Yes. Yeah, annual report. You bet.
Thank you.
Councilor Silsby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I honestly don't see the point of doing a longer contract when we could always extend our contract. And after review, it's a lot more than funding for me when I look at this. I'm looking at liability. If this is actually working, if we're seeing results, then we can move forward again. But why tie us into a contract and then we are supposed to get out of it? If something does not go right, would be the way I would look at it. It's the city's land. It's not like we're leasing the land. Like if you were leasing a building, I would understand that more, but we're not. So it's there regardless. It belongs to the city. So the only thing would be the contractor. And they're going to want to continue with the program that they're getting paid for. So I don't see the reasoning behind a longer contract. I think that there's a lot more reason for a contractor to step up to the plate if they have to prove it to us in 1 year. They don't have 2 years. And we reevaluate and move forward. I mean, that's business 101 right there.
Councilor Savage.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. That was one of my questions as well, in regards to funding. If we fund through 2023, the next sentence says the service provider will assist the city in finding additional funds for operations in future years. Does that mean the city is responsible until 2023 and then going forward that would be the service contractor?
Well, it's additional funds, and it would not necessarily be that they fund all of their fine grants, but if they did, that'd be spectacular. But they'd be assisting us in finding additional funds to be able to do it.
So just a general note on terms of contracts. It is a sort of a standard assumption, I guess, that if you are offering a longer period of time, you hopefully are increasing the pool of respondents because they are looking for security over a longer period of time. So hopefully you get more competition. And then also, if you shorten the actual term rather than allowing yourself the opportunity to extend annually or whenever, however, give yourself the opportunity for extensions. Once the contract terminates, it actually terminates. You can't extend it without going out for another solicitation, which can disrupt your continuity and takes time and money. So there are benefits to public entities, this kind of contract aside, just any time that you're going out, a 5-year contract is pretty standard.
Councilor,
I'm sorry, an ability for a 5-year contract.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Couldn't it be, though, Carrie, if you did a 1-year contract and you write it into the contract that we will reevaluate and do even a 2-year renewal if things are going really well and it's been very successful and we're seeing a turnaround in people. But, so that initiative to put in for the RFP from these nonprofits would still be there because they know if they prove themselves and if they are what they say they are, that they can do this job really well, then I think that they should be up to that task. And it may not be standard, but neither are homeless camps. These are all new to the cities. And so this is something that we're all in kind of uncharted territory. It's not a normal thing. I mean, this is for the United States, all pretty new. So.
Yeah, so absolutely. What I think you're referencing is kind of what's written in the term, paragraph 1 of the contract. You're just saying you would reduce it to a 1-year term with 4 possible 1-year extensions if extended in writing by the city. That leaves the full discretion to the city. Of course, you're evaluating if they're meeting the scope of work. I wouldn't limit it so that, the city can only extend it if X, Y, and Z because you want to leave your options open in the event you want to extend it. But, so I think that's the way it's written, almost. It's just a matter of discussion whether that's an initial 1, 2, 3 first term.
Councilor Flight.
I was just going to explain, we've gone through countless RFPs and it is not a quick process. And so if we did just a 1-year flat contract, 9 months later, we're back out there with an RFP. Before we've even had a chance to evaluate it, we're out there, potentially putting out another request for proposal because you have appeals periods, there's a whole process. There has to be notified for a period of time. There have to be an appeals process. So there's actually quite a window in there of time to establish an RFP under normal circumstances, especially.
Councilor Irvin.
Yeah, I kind of wish Councilor Stinnett was here because I see a distinction and I just want to check in with Councilor Savage and the rest of you who were in support of this last time. What effect has your understanding of the low barrier requirement changed at all? Because there was a lot of discussion about we want accountability, if we're going to do this, I just wonder, has this changed your understanding or are you on board with this as written? What concerns do you have, if any?
Councilor Savage.
Yeah, that's a great question, Councilor Irvin. I don't think that my understanding has changed at all. I think this provides better clarification. I really appreciate the discussion that we're having. I think definite parameters and making things very clear makes it easier for understanding, both for the folks that are applying for the RFP as well as for the folks looking on the outside looking in. This is kind of what I was understanding is what I'm seeing. So I don't know if that gives enough clarity.
I kind of think we all want the highest low barrier we can get so we can move them to a better place rather than providing a retirement house for them. So, Councilor Salisbury first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can say that a few things that I'm absolutely not going to be able to sign off on myself is drug use. And I would like to see them getting into programs. I also don't believe in a no background check if there is some reason to check someone's background, and if it's at the cost of protecting the other people that are in there at the time and the care providers. If someone knows something about someone, I just think we have a responsibility to protect our citizens that live around there and the people that we're trying to help. So there's two of mine.
Councilor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And then my one big question is, if this thing does fall off the rails, does the council have the power to pull the plug? I mean, if it just completely goes nuts down there.
Absolutely. You have
Yeah.
that 30-day termination provision that's in the contract.
Okay.
It's termination for convenience, which means any reason or no reason.
Thank you.
Councilor Irvin.
So I'm not sure exactly what we were trying to accomplish here tonight, but I had a list of things that I would add. I would limit possessions to some degree. These are all like ideas that would have to be, countered and developed, with the idea that a lot of times I could see somebody could have an unlimited number of possessions and it really inhibit the flow of the shelter. Certainly I wouldn't want stolen items accumulating there. I know that there was a big problem with that up by the Foursquare Church up in Eugene off of 13th. There was a bike disassembly plant kind of thing going on. I didn't see anything about age restrictions in terms of unaccompanied minors. I don't know if that's covered, but wouldn't want 8-year-olds going there with no background checks, with no, like, a mix. I didn't see anything of that. When talking to some of the homeless in the area, they were pretty adamant about some sort of a mental illness screening, saying like certain people we cannot be close to, whether we're in the same area or not. They just it aggravates them to potential violence, and that was specifically prohibited in this. Being able to screen for that. Doing the criminal background checks and different things that were talked about. So, I mean, I'm for adding things. On principle, I'm not for this, but since we're a council, I want to do the best I can with what we've decided on. I've also written up a note that would love to see posted on either the inside of every one of the shelters, or somewhere in the public space. I'm not quite sure how to disseminate that. I don't know if I should just email it out or read it. It's a work in progress, but would say something to the effect of, and be up for revision. The shelter site has been public notice. This shelter site is a provision made on behalf of the city of Cottage Grove in response to, it lists the court cases that really necessitated this, that we're responding to. This shelter site has been provided by the city of Cottage Grove taxpayers for those experiencing homelessness to ensure that all Cottage Grove area residents and visitors have equal access to clean and safe public parks and spaces within the city. It is the hope of the community who are now covering the operational costs of this shelter, including all the power, drinking water, food, laundry, hygiene items, bedding, treatment of sewage, security, maintenance of the grounds and structures, social services, and all related opportunities provided within, that each individual who chooses to receive the benevolence of the taxpayers do so with the intent to move forward and upward toward being a positive contributor to this community or another. Please appreciate the use of these facilities and services provided by the taxpayers of Cottage Grove, understanding that other community enhancing goals will be prioritized.
Okay, so we're coming up on 5 minutes left. Do you guys want to go right to 7, or do you want to break in between?
We can go.
Okay.
Councilor Fleck.
So the problem with background checks is what standard do you then apply? You know, I don't know firsthand, but my guess is many folks that are unhoused are going to have some sort of criminal history. And so, you know, I also, our attorney can chime in. It seems like that's creating a barrier for a lot of the folks that, you know, under a legal standard could also, I also agree though on the minors, completely do not want to see minors on the site at all. Yeah, yeah, but we might actually put specific language in there to include that. I love your idea, Councilor Irvin. I just, as you're reading it, I'm thinking from the client's standpoint, is this going to be effective, you know, as far as motivating that growth? And I just don't know. I think that that's redundant. I mean, I think that the expectation is that we're, you know, trying to provide a pathway back into, you know, life and community. And I actually think that that could be a negative. I mean, I appreciate the sentiment. I'm trying to look at what, you know, is actually going to motivate and help our clients work towards the goals that we all hope that they do. I'm sorry, I'm probably not on the microphone here. So I don't think I could support that. Maybe some sort of version of it, but I don't think as written I could support that.
So if I may respond to that, the framework would be to describe why we're doing this. And if I'm misunderstanding that why we're doing this, we weren't doing this before. So why I understand that why we're doing this is because of 3 decisions in the courts. That's kind of why we're here. So I would want that stated. This is why we're doing it. And then what it is. So if there's disagreement on that, I should stop there.
I guess I'll just kind of go back to what is the ultimate goal. I mean, what is our ultimate goal here? If it's to make statements, we can do that to the media right here tonight. And I mean, I think that that'll be printed and published, and you know, certainly, I think the community will understand our intent. I just don't know that that is going to be a productive, effective way of working with our folks. You know, well, we don't really want to do this, but we're gonna do it anyway because of these court cases. I don't think that that sends the message that I want to have up in the cabin for folks that are trying to better themselves. I think that I would rather have a message that, you know, says we care enough about you and our community, you know, that we're doing this. I think that we want to make sure that you are able to, you know, be productive and that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I mean, if it's motivated along those lines, you bet. But to state that we're just doing this because we have to, I just don't find that to be of value in any fashion.
Do you believe it to be disingenuous? Because I see it as we weren't doing anything until this happened.
I think that that's going to be well documented with the media here. So I guess I don't see the value of that.
So let me give you a possible alternative here as well. On page 18 in the response for the proposers, we have the narrative that's required from the people that propose, because this is a services contract, not a goods. I mean, it's a personal services, so it gets nebulous because they're providing. But in 3, we go through and they're supposed to provide in narrative how they would staff and operate, how the program will be staffed for services, what activities will support participants, describe a copy of the policies demonstrating the low barrier approach. And I think we could add an E there that would say, provide a sample of your policies and procedures that would maintain cleanliness, limit property on possessions, and protect our existing property and facility, and do that there. And I think it would answer a lot of the points that you mentioned there. Stolen items I don't think are a big issue because it is our property. We will be able to go on the property and make sure there aren't stolen items. That's one of the issues with some of the churches that are operating facilities is it's someone else's property, and in order to go on that property you have to have a warrant. We don't have to have a warrant on our own property. So we can maintain and monitor for stolen items on the property. So I don't think that's an issue that we have to deal with. And then your statement, I like your statement, but I think it maybe fits in possibly the introduction to the RFP in section 1, that we could put that, fit that in there, right there in A, saying here's why we're doing this, and here's some of the values that the community has in doing that. Because I think posting it in the individual units is probably, I don't know if they're going to read it, but the proposers being in the RFP, we could then use that to evaluate or monitor how the RFP proposers are doing. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying. The value that I see is that you connect directly with the giver to the recipient.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing is that we want to protect the recipient from the expectation of those who are paying for it. And it may not, and what I would like to do is have a shared, like, come to consensus on what we could agree on to present, but at the end of the day, saying the people of Cottage Grove are giving something up for you, and there is an expectation tied to it. It's that we'd be able to use the public spaces as we were, and as their intended purpose. If we could come to, how that's worded or whatever, I'm not tied to, but I guess I'm responding to seeing a real lack. That's an element of accountability.
Yeah, we can post it. I think that's a fine idea, and we'll put it in the house and in the units. So let's get the language and we can work that. That's separate from the proposal in the RFP.
Yeah, I wondered if it was because it's a city property thing,
But yeah, since we were talking about it with the RFP, I was trying to squeeze it in there, but if we want to just put it on the buildings, then that's fine. And we can work on the language with you for that. But if we took your other items, because that's one of the things that we want to limit too, and how do we get that? We can ask them to provide us what their operating procedures and policies will be. What kind of guidelines are they going to have? And then that's up for negotiation. We're going to say, hey, you didn't put anything in there about don't tamper with the fire extinguishers or the smoke alarms, and we'll get that put in. And so those are some things that we could add in that narrative, and I think that's where it would fit for what you're asking for the other items on the list. Okay.
Councilor Soulsby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also wanted to touch real quickly on the background check. And it's not like it's an expected to check everyone's background. I'm just saying I would prefer it not in the language that we absolutely cannot do background checks, because that is taking all the rights out of our hands. And if we need to, we need to.
So if you look at 2.6, the third bullet point down, it currently reads so you may not deny entry based on criminal background or history unless a participant poses an imminent threat to themselves, staff, or others. So I was going to point to that as hopefully that addresses your concern, your prior expressed concern, but now I'm hearing a different request. So what, if anything, do we want to do with that language?
This language doesn't prohibit background checks.
Right.
It just says you can't use them to prevent somebody unless they are posing an imminent threat to themselves or others.
Does that address your concern, or does that exacerbate your concern?
I just don't know why it needs to be in there at all. Are you planning on denying access to someone? Do we need that in? If you're going to deny access because of a background check, I would think it would be something substantial.
And that's why that's in there this way, is we want it to be clear that it's for something substantial. We don't want somebody saying, oh, this person's been convicted of shoplifting when they were 10. That doesn't make sense.
I don't know which one was first.
Real quick, I just wanted to say, so if I have a record of violence and sex offenses, basically what we're going to be creating down there is a social cocktail.
No, that would be somebody who would pose an imminent threat to the safety of staff and others.
So we'll know that before.
You would know it, and potentially the service provider would not allow that threat in.
Would hope so, yeah.
Councilor Urban?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought the language is that we couldn't do a background check unless there was violence or something happened.
No,
So
this says, if you read the sentence, service provider may not deny entry to the project based on any of the following criteria. In bullet point 1, 2, and 3, 3 says criminal background or history unless a participant poses an imminent threat to themselves, staff, or others. So we can't deny entry unless the criminal background shows that they're a danger to others.
So the plan would be to run a criminal background check on everyone? That would be the only way you would know, right?
Well, don't you have to register as a sex offender? I mean, isn't that the expectation that, so,
But we're not stating that they are doing it. Wouldn't that be up to their discretion then to run them or not?
Right. And so that'd be another question in the policies. How are they going to determine?
Couldn't we state it in here that they will?
I'm also confused on what the difference is between a sex offender and a violent sex offender.
There are a variety of classes of sex offenders. Some sex offenders don't even have to register or anything like that. Or they're not restricted if they register. They have to register, but they're not restricted where they're at. Others are restricted to where and who they can be in contact with.
It's pretty broad. Scope on that.
I think we need a much longer work session on this. An hour there's just no way we can hash this out.
I don't know.
So can we continue this at the next meeting early?
We're running out of time.
Because we need to get this moving and to fill the facility. Because we're going to have to go through the RFP process and do that recruitment and then select the.
I guess that's why we wanted this earlier. And
Yes.
we were told we couldn't get it earlier until we decided on a location. But now
We
we're
can do
being,
it after the regular meeting, or we just keep going until we're done. The regular meeting doesn't start until you.
Close this meeting.
But
So does the council want to continue on with this until we finish it? Or do you want to adjourn this meeting, do the regular meeting, and come back to this? Yeah. What?
I think
recess.
Recess till after. Okay, so I'm going to call recess on the work session. We will go into the regular council meeting. Call the meeting to order. Will the recorder please call the roll? Sorry.
Counselor Solsby.
here.
Counselor Savage.
Here.
Youth Representative. Counselor Fleck.
Here.
Counselor Stennett. Counselor Urban.
Here.
Counselor Roberts.
here.
Mayor Gowing.
Here, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have item 3 as a special presentation, Oregon Tree City of the Year Award presentation and annual Urban Forestry Committee report to the City Council. Mr. Mongan and Ms. Newman.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The City of Cottage Grove has been awarded the 2022 Oregon Tree City of the Year Award. Representative from Oregon Department of Forestry, Kristen Ramstead, is here to present the award to Council. Following the presentation of the award, Riley Newman will give her annual update on the state of the urban forest to the Council.
Good evening, Mayor Gowing and the Honorable City Council of Cottage Grove. My name is Kristen Ramstad. I am the acting manager of the Oregon Department of Forestry Urban and Community Forestry Assistance Program. I am honored to be here representing the Oregon Department of Forestry and Oregon Community Trees to present the 2022 Oregon Tree City of the Year Award to the City of Cottage Grove. For over 20 years, Oregon Community Trees and the Oregon Department of Forestry have recognized individuals, organizations, and cities who do the often unsung work of improving and managing our urban and community forests across Oregon. So I know Riley will be saying a few words about the state of Oregon, of Cottage Grove's urban forest, but I'd just like to sing a few praises for the city's urban forestry efforts here. The city is receiving this award because in the 28 years that it has been recognized nationally as a Tree City USA, it has demonstrated a desire to grow a healthy urban forest and improve the livability and quality of life for its citizens now and in the future. In the words of your city planner, Eric, being a Tree City USA recognized community has changed our way of thinking about our urban forest. From adopting an approved street tree list to holding annual Arbor Day celebrations, Tree City USA status has raised local awareness of proper care and management practices of public and private trees. The Urban Forestry Committee, city staff, and residents alike take pride in our efforts to grow and maintain our urban forest. Being recognized as a Tree City USA city is a huge part of that pride. So along with recognizing cities as Tree City USAs, the Arbor Day Foundation presents growth awards annually to Tree City USA communities that demonstrate higher levels of tree care and community engagement above and beyond the 4 basic standards required for Tree City USA. Cottage Grove has received 5 Tree City Growth Awards over the last 7 years. So some examples of the city's Growth Award accomplishments include, first, the creation of a special fund to purchase trees and to support new tree maintenance practices, community education, and Arbor Day activities. Also, the acquisition of just under 5 acres of riparian land for parks and open space. Also, the completion of a tree canopy survey using iTree Canopy, and the recycling and reuse of woody debris from branch and leaf pickup programs and tree maintenance operations, and finally, the addition of 2 new Urban Forest Committee members. Additionally, Cottage Grove is one of the relatively few Oregon cities that has an ISA certified arborist on staff, I believe. Chris Centers provides his technical expertise and guidance to city staff and the Urban Forestry Committee and leads the city's tree pruning and removal crew. So at the heart of Cottage Grove's urban forestry efforts is the city's Urban Forestry Committee, which was created in 1994 to advise the City Council on tree-related issues. Riley Newman, the chair of the city's Urban Forestry Committee, has said, "Our mission is to grow awareness of what trees do for our community and to build a lasting tree legacy for future generations." Last month, I was able to participate in the Arbor Day Tree Fair and a community tree giveaway project that the committee organized with funding from the Arbor Day Foundation. Currently, the committee is focusing on areas throughout the city that can benefit from more tree canopy, is studying the feasibility of a city legacy or heritage tree program, and is working on a revision on the approved street tree list. This summer, they plan to begin work on the development of the city's first inventory-based urban forest management plan. So thank you to the Urban Forestry Committee for all your work on behalf of Cottage Grove's urban trees. And if anybody is here from the Urban Forestry Committee, so all said, the city of Cottage Grove has so much to be proud of for its urban forestry efforts, and this is why representing the Department of Forestry and Oregon Community Trees, I am pleased to present this 2022 Oregon Tree City of the Year Award to the City of Cottage Grove. With this award, We are celebrating and recognizing many, many years of the cities and urban forestry committee's work and dedication to its city trees. You should count yourselves among the leaders of Oregon Tree Cities USA here in Oregon. So congratulations. And
Okay, so that brings us to item 5, appearances of interested citizens. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Mr. Armstead hit a lot of the high notes, so that's okay. It sounds great coming from ODF, I'm going to say. It sounds better. So my name's Riley Newman, and I chair the Urban Forestry Committee, maybe 5 or 6 years now. But it's truly a labor of love, being born and raised here in Cottage Grove. I've seen it grow and change, and so I'm just really happy to be a part of the legacy that we leave behind. So, with that being said, I have named my address to you the 2022 State of the Trees Address. Very official name. But just to give you guys some updates. So all 7 seats are filled on the Urban Forestry Committee at this time. Deborah Bartlett, who's here, is one of our new members, as well as Mark McCaffrey. Deborah brings to the committee her experience in running a nonprofit organization called We Plant the World, which works to plant trees in areas around the world. Mark McCaffrey is a certified arborist and brings his expertise and from his experience in land use planning, wildland firefighting, and as an employee of the City of Springfield's Public Work Division. So Deborah and Mark, along with our longtime committee members, Susan Johnson, Jimmy Schapper, Ona Chambers, and Paul Higgins, are all making their mark here in Cottage Groves within the urban forest, and we anticipate more great things to come over the next few years. We know that the City of Cottage Grove has been honored with being named the 2022 Oregon Tree City of the Year, so that was very exciting. We've received our 28th Tree City Award this year. Pause for effect. The city received its 5th Growth Award from the Arbor Day Foundation, so that's also feels really rewarding. The city this year was awarded a $6,700 grant from the Arbor Day Foundation, which was made possible by the Serendipity Foundation. And this allowed the Urban Forestry Committee to actually triple the size of our annual tree giveaway this year from the previous years where we did about 300 to over 1,000 trees. And the tree giveaway was held on April 2nd this year at Coiner Park and was a huge success, if you ask me. But we got a lot of really great coverage in the media. The tree giveaway made the front of the Register Guard, the front page of the Sentinel, and the front page of the Chronicle, as well as on KVAL. So there was a lot of great coverage. And I would like to thank being awarded Oregon's Tree City of the Year as getting that coverage out for our amazing annual event. So we also have been working for the past 3 years to create a local tree inventory using the city's iWorks program. And so to date, we've got about 2,430 trees inventoried, and that's across the city. It includes relevant information regarding like the tree's location, the condition, type, size, proximity to utilities, and other important info. And as time permits and with the availability of volunteers, we'll continue to be working on that inventory. And all of the trees that we gave away in the tree giveaway, we're trying to do our best to make sure that those get inputted into the inventory as well. So the city planted a number of ponderosa pine trees along the treated wastewater pond to replace those that were removed during the construction of that holding pond. And additionally, a few hundred native trees and shrubs were planted along the river behind Lincoln Middle School following the blackberry removal that the city did last year. 10 street and right-of-way tree removals requests were considered by the Urban Forestry Committee. These trees are in various parts of town and are each considered individually by the committee. And we provide technical support and evaluations, and review the evaluations that are performed by the city arborist, Chris Centers. And in areas where it's appropriate, new trees will be planted to replace those trees removed. So while it's important to reflect on this year's successes, it's also important to look into the future and focus our attentions on how the Urban Forestry Committee can really continue to work with and better serve the community. So for the 2022-2023 fiscal year, the committee will begin developing the Cottage Grove Urban Forestry Plan. The benefits of having such a plan are many. It'll help provide direction for maintenance and improvement of the city's urban forest, and also will make recommendations to enhance and improve our city's urban forest now and into the future. So lastly, the Urban Forestry will draft the revised street tree list to be considered by the Planning Commission and then City Council for possible adoption. For examples, topics that we might consider during this process or any new developments regarding forest pests and diseases, for example, the spread of emerald ash borer. So I'd like to finish my address to council with a quick message about the importance of the Urban Forestry Committee and the city's urban forests, and why we as a committee are being proactive in our actions and planning, and really focusing on equity with regards to our urban forests. And I really like this quote from a city urban forester, and he said, through our urban forests, we have many opportunities to reimagine and redefine our relationships between local forests, our built environments, and ourselves. We need roads to get us to our jobs, hospitals and clinics for our health and well-being, and affordable housing to sustain us. And trees can be a source of job creation, wellness, and a means to create a home. Trees and forests and the benefits they provide us will be more important than ever for our growing population that need healthy communities and a livable environment, especially in the face of a changing climate. But our history of environmental and social justice in the United States has already placed some communities at a disadvantage, so more must be done to help all areas of the community achieve tree equity, a future where trees are planted where they're needed most for the benefit of all people, regardless of class or race. So Cottage Grove is a growing community, and we can't deny that. However, we don't have to choose between growth and green spaces. We can have both and must value both. So people in our community need a healthy and livable environment, and trees are part of that solution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So before we get into appearances of interested citizens for items not on the agenda, I just want to remind everybody that comments from the audience aren't allowed during people's testimonies, amens, cheers, boos, clapping. Please don't do that. Last meeting, a rude comment was made to our youth that caused the youth to stop talking. That kind of behavior will not be allowed. You will be removed from the meeting. So this is a time for citizens to comment on items not listed on the agenda for a maximum of 30 minutes. Individual speakers must be recognized by presiding officer, provide their name and address, and will be allowed up to 5 minutes or less with council approval. Comments regarding any matter scheduled for public hearing may be provided only in that hearing. Comments on agenda items may be taken prior to council's discussion on that item. Council will not engage in any discussion or make any decision based on public comment at this time. However, the council may take the comments under advisement for discussion and action at a further council meeting. First one I have is Patrick Cartwright.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. We're a business that's down in the industrial park. We're located at 2145 South Bar Street. That'll be the address for record. My name is Patrick Cartwright. Northwest Automotive Customs is our formal name. The proposed site of the homeless shelter presents many, many variables for us. One, we're going to have to spend a minimum of $25,000 to increase our security. I had a business out on Highway 99 at Four Corners in Eugene. Suffered a lot of loss, a lot of loss in financial revenues even. When this was proposed, it came and blindsided me. I would have never moved my business from Crestville to Cottage Grove knowing this was going to happen. The site is going to be directly catty corner from us over by the storage units. That means that people are going to pass down our street, past my business. I have over $3 million worth of vehicles that we restore in inventory right now that I have to be concerned about. This isn't a problem that's going to go away. There's many factors that I have to look at in this. One, what is my loss of revenue going to be when a customer comes up and there's camp trailers all around? Because we know it's going to happen. There's no way that the city's going to be able to go up when somebody camps out on the street and they claim that's their residence. It's not going to happen. You're going to cite them. That's going to be the end of it. I lived through this before. I've seen what the laws was. Then the fact that we have to put fencing up, we have to put more security cameras up. If I put a camp trailer at the side of my building and have a 24-hour security on site, that's going to probably be against city ordinance. I don't know. I haven't explored that. But several of my business colleagues that's in this town and I are forming basically a party that we will file an injunction to stop this at this point. Matter of fact, our attorneys was involved in it today. We had a discussion with them. I don't believe that the city has taken the business community and listened to them at all. I haven't ever received a reaching hand. I held a luncheon in the park down here where I put on public social media. I would love to see everybody come in. I had 3 councilmen that showed up. The homeless that was there basically stated they will not attend that homeless shelter down there. We're going to experience an influx of out-of-state people that's going to be utilizing the shelter. That's what's going to happen. It's not going to support anybody that's here. It's going to fill up. And from the way that I see it, and from the RFP is a disaster waiting to happen. And I also heard Mr. Myers this morning stating that we're just going to fill up the water down there next to the building. You can't do that. I spent a lot of years in construction. That site is not going to be habitable. You're going to build up the area around it. You have clay soils. The ditch is in a position to where if it overflows, it's going to run back into the house. There needs to be a timeout period on this. And that's what me and a few other people are planning on doing. We're going to give the city that timeout period in any means that we possibly can, just so we can have an open discussion. So we can have a discussion that says, is the police funding going to be increased? What about the infrastructure for medical response out there? I've seen it firsthand. I have video footage of it on Highway 99. An average of 15 to 20 ambulances a day are responding to people that was down out there due to overdoses, seizures, whatever, alcohol withdrawals. It happens. I'm not against giving the homeless a place to be. I'm not against it at all. We have a shelter downtown. That warming shelter is there. I got a response the other day that we're just going to contribute to the suffering of people. How? The city could open that and call that the shelter. There's no reason why it couldn't. It's ready. Turn of the key, it can be open. This, it's going to be a while. That I promise, because it's like there's going to be hurdles that's going to have to be met. I haven't seen any permits posted out there. I'm sure the city did their due diligence and obtained permits.
You need to wrap up.
I will. So, in other words, this is just the beginning of the business community speaking. Thank you.
Thanks. Bob Langles. I'm having trouble reading. Oh, sorry.
Okay, so 5 minutes is not enough, but I'm going to go for it. So basically, I've been here since 96, and I deal with homeless people myself for years. I've taken people off the street, given them a job, a place to live, and try to uplift them. My wife also works with women who got addicted to drugs, got their kids taken away, and she gets them off of drugs, gets them back in the system, and gets the kids back. This has been something we've done since 1996 here in And successful rate on that's about 2.5% for me, 3.5% for my wife. But, just because the percentage is that low don't mean you just walk away from a situation like this. So I can speak on this. I know a lot about homeless people and drugs and the system and how it works. Basically, you're saying you want to copy something that Eugene's doing. Hey, you know what? That's just, we might as well be copying Portland as far as that goes. Why can't Cottage Grove be unique? We should have service contracts. In other words, contracts with these guys that are coming in, have them sign a piece of paper if they're going to be there for no liability. Why do we have to put the responsibility on a subcontractor? That's passing the buck. Giving them something like this, like we see in Portland and Eugene, is just enabling them. I know this firsthand. When you help somebody out, that's great. But if they don't want to be helped and they just want a helping hand, you're enabling them, and they're going to stay on drugs and continue robbing from people. One thing that hasn't been mentioned through this whole meeting is the fact of jobs and drugs. Drugs is devastating. Drugs will turn a good person around into an evil person. And homeless people, they are on drugs. And the 10% that are not on drugs are the ones that should be on the list first. When you take a glob of poop and you stick it on the wall and that's what you got, you just put them all in the same basket when they're not. There needs to be a separation of some of these homeless people that are off of drugs that want to do better and that make the right choices. You need to separate them from what we have going on instead of putting them all in the same system, just like we're talking about. Do we want drug offenders out there, sex offenders, or people really trying to get their stuff together? So if as a community you want to invest into this, my investment says invest into the people that are trying to make the right decision and choices going forward. Especially if we're talking about a constitutional problem. If we're building something that there may be a constitutional problem, why are we doing that? Really, it doesn't make sense. Getting them into a program is the most important thing. I mean, why would you invest into a homeless camp shelter without having a program set up for them to get off the streets? Just holding their hands and putting them in a tent and a place and making yourself feel good, it's not where that belongs. We need a program to get them off the drugs. There should be 12-step program meetings at that camp site at all times. Every day there should be. That's really helpful if the program does work if you use it. And yes, the 3-year failure contract, that's just like setting yourself up for a failure. If you're going to do something like this, then you need to make sure it's going to be successful. Everything I do in my business, I make sure I look at the future that we're going to be successful in. So if you're setting yourself up and saying, well, we're going to just try this and try that, think about it a little bit more. Make it successful. Be unique. Be different than Eugene, Springfield, or Portland. Be different. Set up a program to where if you're going to help homeless people out, that they're going to be successfully getting it out into getting jobs and other programs, because there's plenty of jobs out here and stuff like that. And it is a fact. You put homeless people out there right now, 90% of them are on drugs, and those 90% are going to rob us in our area. I have $100,000 worth of stuff that sticks out of my warehouse every day. I can't stick that in my warehouse, so do I need to take a $100,000 loss, or do I need to move my business? That's going to be the question that comes up to me. So I just ask you guys to think about this strongly. If you're going to set something up, and then we already have a camp over there that we've invested into, what you call the warm shelter that was supposed to be a homeless shelter. That's an investment from us as a community, and there's nothing been done about that. We have nobody's living in there as homeless people right now. But I met a lady the other day who was homeless that was off of drugs for 7.5 years, and she's looking for a job. She would be a perfect candidate to be in one of those places. So let's not make the helplessness, let's help them up, give them a helping hand up. But as far as what's going on out there, I also oppose of it just because, industrial park, and we got a lot of new businesses moving in, and this is going to come into place and just really crushes businesses. There's no other example you can give that would show me that homeless people living next to a business doesn't destroy the business. There's no example that you can give me. That I know for a fact. But let's set up a plan and make it work. That's how we do it. Like you said, get them from here to you. That would be great. Okay. So my 5 minutes out.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks. Johanna Z.
Hi, Johanna Z, 1386 Cottonwood Place. Thank you, both of the speakers we just had, Patrick and Bob. I encourage anyone in the community to get a hold of those guys if they're interested in doing something to do what's right for this community. I think the biggest thing I want to get across right now is that the people here have spoken. We've had at least 2 people saying they're going to have to put their homes up for sale. We've heard from a dad who's got 4 young children who's very concerned. We've heard people say they've spoken to the unsheltered, saying they're not going to partake. I was also out at that meeting in the park, and two of them said, they just give us way too much stuff. There's no incentive for us to do anything. They just keep giving us things. And, you know, last time, I think, the mayor, you mentioned Sutherland is doing one of these low barrier sites. So a couple of us went down to Sutherland because direct experience, I think, is really, really important and not to be negated. So we went down there to see what this was all about. It was interesting. No one was at liberty to speak about it, neither the police officers or the city workers. It was actually, the city manager was the only one, and I couldn't get a hold of him, so we played phone tag a little bit. But we went out and we sat with someone at this Hastings Street camp. It was a tented 2-acre fenced-in area, and it would probably be too long to tell you all the amazing information that we got from out there. It's not a regulated site. It's been there about 6 months. There are 0 services currently out there. They're self-governed. There is a camera out there. A neighbor gives them electricity. They have water, and there's no restrictions. Very low barrier. I mean, in fact, the gentleman we were speaking to was packing a bowl while we were sitting there, and he's generational homeless. His mom's in a local motel. It was actually quite sad. They said there's a lot of complaints from the neighbors. It was just outside of town like this. The neighbors don't like them walking past. They said they think we're all violent. He did say, though, since January, he's only had to call 911 once for a knife attack, but asked if we could provide him with training on how to evaluate for psychiatric problems, because he's very concerned about a lot of the people coming in there. And that if they have any more than 21, there were 17 currently, that's when the rats start coming, and they'd have to give us more land at that point, was what he said. That's kind of that in a nutshell. So we want truth and transparency. Things are changing in this world. We've lived by default for so long, and we've just kind of let things happen and, let things be out of control. But I just want to say that we're paying attention. We're watching. We are going to be sure that everything that's done is done for this community. This RFP, I've got a few pages of notes about this. It does look like it was taken from other places. Basically, all this language of equity and disparity says that we're a racist, really horrible racist community. And I invite those writing this RFP to reword it that's specifically for this community, if this RFP is going to go through, to pay attention to the issues that are here and listen to the people here. And I also want to remind the people that we do have the power. We can bring forth lawsuits. We can bring forth these other issues and take back that power and not allow the system that's been in place of government overreach to continue as such. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Kathleen Matson.
Hi, Kathleen Matson, 1740 Bryant Avenue. As Joanna was saying, I agree, government overreach, and I haven't read the RFP, but that sounds very sad about using the terms inequity, whatever they use nowadays. And it's just sad, and I think about the site, I feel that there wasn't more ideas given into finding out what the city of Cottage Grove can do. Some different options that the councilors could, look over. Not just pushing this Highway 99 site. And pardon me, I'm sorry, I should have said hi, Councilman, hi, Councilwoman, Mayor. There are the homeless folks on drugs and have commit crimes and sexual crimes, and I'm very concerned of the children. On our street, the high school kids and the grade schools kids at Bohemia Elementary School. These homeless folks, if there's not a thorough background check, or maybe there's, the person just started doing sexual acts with young kids, or something, there's no knowledge of it, our poor kids, are going to be subjected to harm and danger. And that location is a terrible spot. And then especially the city is proposing to put a pathway on our street. And our street is a high school and the Bohemian Elementary School, which all the kids walk to school or walk back home. And it's just sad. And then the clinic being by the high school is the wrong place, because the kids nowadays, the bad environment of nowadays, the agendas they're proclaiming, like I should go to talk about kids. In the 1980s, I heard on a radio program news that California was doing a pilot program called Project 10. And Project 10 was being placed into the California schools, in the high schools, to start implementing the teaching of homosexuality. And it went okay because the parents probably had no knowledge, very few probably had no knowledge, and so therefore it came into more states. And this is before the big, huge computer that had all the school systems in that one computer. And then that one computer system of all the states, happened. And the new age stuff started happening in the schools. My daughter was in kindergarten in the late 80s, and she came home with this picture, and it looked odd. It was a drawing, and I said, Loretta, what is this? And she said, what did you draw here? She said, our teacher told us to close our eyes and, to focus that we're out of our bodies and we're floating on the ceiling of our classroom, and then look what you see, and then when you're back in your body now, and now draw what you've seen. That's new age stuff. And then there's just so many bad things in the public school system right now. And kids, are told to think about their feelings only. And the teachers, okay, I gotta say this too. The Hatch Amendment protects the parents. The Hatch Amendment, everyone please listen. Hatch, like Orrin Hatch, Senator Orrin Hatch. 1984, there was court proceedings of all America states come together, and all these folks spoke about the public school system, what their kids were doing or having to do, and so there was a book called Child Abuse in the Classroom, and you can find it online, I'm sure, but it's written by Phyllis Shapley, and it has all the testimonies of the court proceedings, and that is
You need to wrap up.
Okay, the Hatch Amendment can protect your kids, your grandkids. The administrators will try to intimidate you. Principals, they'll get them all together. I had that multiple times in different school districts. And, you just stick to the Hatch Amendment. Don't let them intimidate you. Your kids do not have to participate. Say, I want my child out of this class. And it's true. It protects you. Thank you.
Debbie Ladd Howell.
Good evening, folks. My address is 36756 Shoreview Drive. And I wanted to address a couple things. I was here at last week's meeting as well. And as we all know with what's going on, everybody's emotions are pretty high with all of this. We all have opinions on this. But I first wanted to start out by thanking Councilwoman Soulsby. You announced that you're going to be running for mayor. I think that's an amazing thing. But I also wanted to thank you, too, for asking questions, for continuing to, when you don't understand something, to continue to ask questions. And if ever somebody wants to shut you down over that, continue to ask more questions, because that means it's time to press forward. And my next comment was, I'm glad, sir, that you brought this forward about the happenings of last meeting's week and some of the rowdiness of the room here. I have to, this is addressed to City Manager Myers here. Majority of the people in this room did not agree with the proposed camp. Still don't seem to be from what we're hearing here tonight. But regardless of a lot of the pointed, sharp-toned comments that were directed at Mr. Myers, even though I am not in the same stance as him, I have to respect you, sir, for maintaining your dignity and sitting through all of it, and either Teflon shoulders, or whatever it is, but you held it together. And as you spoke, there should not be shoutings and rantings from this side, but I cannot go on without mentioning Mr. Fleck. You, sir, are someone that I have, well, I may not agree with a lot of things. I cut you a lot of difference because you are so involved in the community. You have been doing this for, you said, 20 years on this council. But I do not believe it is right for you or anyone to get caught up in your emotions to the point to where you seem to show a contempt for citizens of this lobby and lash out at them, and then you, good sir, apparently according to rules, do not allow someone to, in defense of themselves, to say anything back. And even to the point of calling out on someone's Christianity. I mean, yes, sir, you claim to be one, as does the person of the subject. Does that not make you both brothers in Christ? And so therefore we need to handle our things a little bit differently. And to me, they're just maybe if I am perceiving you right, you are very involved in this community. You do a lot of good for this community, but maybe you don't want to be here anymore, or maybe just your temper got to you. But I was a little discouraged by that because we do have a student sitting in here, and I'm sorry that she's not here tonight, because one thing she does need to be doing is learning from you all how these proceedings should take place, how as we as adults should handle one another, especially in these political matters, and that she does need to see, as we all need to recognize, is that you are all public servants. That means you are in service to the citizens of this town who voted you in. And with that you are not overlords, you are servants to the people. And I would like for her also to always remember her bearings. And with that remembrance, you also remember that we, the people out here, are citizens, not subjects. And so while we get a little bit rowdy and rambunctious, it does not make it right. But we seem to hold y'all to a little bit different standard and look, more that way, to you all. So I just wanted to reach out and make those little comments. I do appreciate all y'all's efforts, but it's tiring to go through this year after year after year, and I can't imagine 20 years of it. Maybe direct your full steam efforts to some of these other projects if that's where your desire leans towards. But thank you once again for listening to me and for the service that y'all are contributing to we the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Feather Bousted.
Hi, Feather Bousted, 1350 Pleasant View Drive. Honorable Mayor Dowling and councilors, what just happened? After all the long, difficult discussions with many good questions still unanswered, how did our city manager's proposal for the city to build and manage a homeless shelter pass with an amendment that was hastily formulated? The clear majority of citizens of Cottage Grove who gave comments before you Monday night, April 25th, were either adamantly opposed or not ready to sign off on the proposed plan because other ideas have not been fully explored. My perception is that a majority of our community's experience of this whole process has been quite short. My guess is many people like me are recently coming to understand the pressures we are under as a city to comply judicially with the ruling of federal and state courts, to have alternative sleeping shelter available before we can enforce the local no camping laws in our parks. I've since read council agendas and minutes dating back from December 13, 2021, when the conversation began in public at the council meeting But the proposal for vote by the council only entered the meeting of April 11th. I was here on the last meeting. It left more questions than answers. My perception is City Council did not represent the majority of the citizens. The taxpayers don't know the basic initial cost of this plan, let alone the projected annual budget. The conversation began 4 months ago, progressing to the fully staffed 30-bed low barrier shelter and graduated up to permanent housing for all the expense, all at the expense of the city, feels rushed. For me, and I believe many community members, we hadn't heard about this very expensive and culture-affecting idea before the so-called town hall presentation last month, which was a highly controlled, airtight presentation with a manipulative series of questions leading to one outcome. Most of the information from it cannot be used with any honesty to determine the community's buy-in. While some people were probably quite happy to hear the city was taking care of the problem, I would like to ask different questions, including, what do we want our city manager focused on? Do we want our highest paid city employee working on social programs or infrastructure? Although it was a nicely polished presentation, I loved the maps, much of it, I was deeply disappointed to realize, not far in, that my ideas were superfluous. I was disappointed most because the community turned out with good energy, ready to talk, solve problems, and I didn't get the chance to hear a single one of them. I realized Cottage Grove has begun to see more homeless people around, and especially in the past few years. I confess, I've watched with minimal action and know that as I've been passive, others have stepped up to deal with this very important issue. Thank you both to our city manager Myers and Councilor Fleck and others, many others, for doing the daily work of helping folks in need. I agree the time is now for all of us who love our community to come together, make solutions, make decisions on behalf of our poorest and sometimes most troubled members. I oppose a housing first government solution because I see social programs funded by tax dollars have no good metrics for success, and government money comes with criteria, stipulations, and liabilities that may not reflect our values. The term low barrier comes to mind. I believe all of us want to help people, but we need more time to come to an agreement of the best way to help. We don't want to go down the path many other cities have tried of endlessly increasing spending with little to no accountability or measures of its success. Housing first isn't my motto. Community first is. We know the solutions for homelessness, drug addiction, and poverty can be affected greatly by government policy, but every real breakthrough for people comes through relationship and community connection. I'm ready to come together, hammer out ideas for solutions, and volunteer my help. We have the answers, and I believe enough willing people to make a tailor-fit program for Cottage Grove. Let's have a real town hall. No tables, no manipulative questionnaire, but the genuine kind where we can exchange ideas, create together for our community.
Need to wrap up.
Community first ways to help. I want to see the people on the street be empowered up and out of their dire situations without having to compromise our city rules, breaking the budget, or allowing people breaking our laws by camping in our parks, but truly lend a hand to anyone who is ready for a hand up. Thank you.
Thank you. Donovan Rose.
I'm just going to keep it short and sweet. My address is 700 East Gibbs right now at the library. I'm one of the fellow people that are in the tent. Due to the opportunity of people willing to help and put their time and effort into it has allowed me to get a job full time, and the chance to do something with myself. I definitely agree with the whole, there should be some sort of evaluation or questionnaire or something to find out if the people actually even want to get help, because if they don't want help, it's not going to do any good. I'm a fellow ex-addict myself, and I need housing is what I need. I don't have access to shower. I can't wash my clothes. I don't have anywhere to store food. So those are the types of things that need to be established if somebody is actually willing to want help or to get help. Other than that, most of the homeless isn't going to take the opportunity or the chance to do something if they don't want to do it themselves. And so I think there should be like a questionnaire or a survey or something. I don't even know if those are the right words, to find out if people even want the help. Because if they don't want the help, you're just wasting a bunch of time and effort, and it's not going to do any good. But there's people like me that are actually trying to do something that need the resources and need the help. There's a difference between a helping hand and a hand up. And I appreciate everybody taking the time and the effort to do something about it. Because if not, I don't know where I'd be. You know? And yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it brings us to item 6, public hearings. There is none. Item 7 is consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
I have a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Item 8, resolution ordinance. There is none. Brings us to item 9, business from the city council. Award of street improvement contract. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, council. So on April 11th, 2022, Cottage Grove and Cresswell posted an invitation to bid street improvements for East Main Street and South River Road in Cottage Grove and Emerald Parkway in Cresswell. The invitation to bid was for a chip seal and liquid road application to East Main Street and Emerald Parkway in Cresswell, and a scrub seal, chip seal, and liquid road application to South River Road. The invitation to bid was a joint effort by both cities to reduce the cost of preparing and seeking bids. Legal counsel prepared the invitation to bid documents following the city's adopted public contracting rules. Sealed bids were due by 3 p.m. on April 29, 2022 at the City of Cottage Grove's Public Works and Development Department. The invitation to bid was advertised on April 13th in the Daily Journal of Commerce and on April 14th in the Cottage Grove Sentinel and the Chronicle. One bid was received and opened on April 29th from Sierra Santa Fe Corporation. The bid document was reviewed and deemed complete. If approved, the chip seal project would be performed the week of July 18th, 2022. Because the work will be performed and funded in the next fiscal year, 2022-23, staff recommends council award approval of the bid contingent on the adoption of the Cottage Grove's 2022-2023 budget. So the recommendation is the city council move to conditionally award the street improvements contract to Sierra Santa Fe Corporation in the amount of $225,500 for the East Main Street and South River Road chip seal projects, and authorize the city manager to sign the contract and all associated documents after the city's 2022-2023 budget is adopted in June of 2022.
Councilor Urban.
So moved. Or do I need to read it?
Second.
I have a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? Councilor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank you very much. This is great. This is, I thought what happened on Gateway was a big improvement. And these roads need our help. And that's what a lot of citizens are crying out for. So thank you and your staff. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Seeing no more, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, item B is council approved purchase of 2.37 acres of land. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city's current water master plan suggests building a water storage reservoir above the end of West Harrison Avenue. The city has located a site off Halderman Road in the recently approved Double H Estate subdivision, lot number 1, at an elevation of 900 feet, which will adequately serve the undeveloped land within the city limits and urban growth boundary. This site is referenced in the city's current water master plan as a location for a new reservoir. Double H Investments Group LLC owns the property that is currently for sale. Lot 1 of the parcel is currently for sale for $330,000. The property is located within the city's UGB and located under Lane County's jurisdiction and Zone R2. Under the current zoning, a municipal reservoir is allowed and under the planning director's approval at Lane County. The parcel has been approved for development by Lane County, meeting all development requirements. The parcel includes an easement for a future water line extending to Mr. Gates's property to the north. This line would eventually connect to the 12-inch water line in West Harrison Avenue, where it's terminated at the end of the street. Legal counsel has prepared the purchase and sale agreement with Double H Investments LLC for the purchase of Lot 1 and Double H Estates off in Halderman Road for a future reservoir. Staff's recommendation is recommends council purchase of Lot 1 of the Double H Estates, 2.37 acres, from Double H Investments LLC, and authorize the city manager to sign all necessary documents.
Councilor Fleck.
Mr. Mayor, move that the council purchase lot number 1 in Double H Estates, 2.37 acres from Double H Investments LLC, and authorize the city manager to sign all necessary documents.
Second.
Have a motion with a second. Same discussion? Councilor Roberts.
How many homes can probably be fit up there once this is accomplished? Is that part of the goal here?
Well, the goal here is for us to locate a reservoir at a high enough elevation to serve the property that's within the city's UGB, urban growth boundary. And this elevation would allow us to serve at 900 feet. It would allow us to serve properties close to 825 to 840 feet in elevation. So it would allow us to serve virtually all the property that's within the UGB that we couldn't serve today with the current system we have.
And where does the money for this come from? What part of the budget?
So we have two sources of revenue. This project does qualify for us to use system development charges, and it would also we could use reserves. I'm proposing that that we would use system development charges to pay for this project.
Okay. Any more? Councilor Fleck?
Well, I just want to commend Mr. Stewart because, I mean, this has been in our plan for many, many years as also one over on Sunrise Ridge, which I fully support both. I mean, this helps, fire suppression, as Mr. Stewart's mentioning, so we conserve higher elevation, properties without having to pump. How many pumping stations do we have? 3 or 4, right? Right now.
Presently we have 2 water pump stations. We have the Taylor and then we have the Holly pump station.
Because we combined the 2, right? So no, I totally and fully support it. I'm really excited about this and looking forward to the next one.
So, but
Councilor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. But it also leads to future growth, does it not?
Well, you can't have growth without that. It's actually required for annexations. We have to be able to provide services. So yes, but it doesn't necessarily mean we will have to have growth. It allows us the ability to grow. So absolutely. But I think the problems with Water Watch and the challenges we've had, getting our permitted rights moved down from Lane Creek, Prather Creek, Tinner Creek, create some challenges. And the more storage we have, the less we'll need to go back in the river and less we'll need to increase the capacity of our plants.
And I hear all that, Mr. Fleck. I'm just, for me, I just have a little problem with a little bit, I think on certain edges, I think we're growing a little bit too quick. I don't feel that for me. Some of the problems we're beginning to have in this town, I think, are compounded by the growth we're having. I think we're forgetting some of the core issues for some of the taxpayers that live in the center of our community. Certain roads. I mean, I know we have a road issue tonight, which we passed. I mean, I agree with a lot of this, but I also just have some concerns about growth. And so I'll just leave that where it lies. I just wanted to say that.
Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Concerns of council? Councilor Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank Amy, Mary Day, for putting a fire under us to get more familiar with the council rules and what we can do and what we can't. I realized that I was really quite ignorant to all that. I started my little quest this week of studying Robert's rules, and then some videos that I was watching indicated that you have to your council rules have to actually cite them for them to actually be what you're referencing. So I wound up with a number of questions. I've been studying them. I will mention one thing. I'd be remiss to not. We do have a council rule that says a member who voted with the majority may move for reconsideration of an action at the same or next following regular meeting. Once a matter has been reconsidered, no motion for further reconsideration shall be made without unanimous consent of the entire council. So if you want to reconsider, please do. That would allow more time for the community to have a more robust conversation that's desiring as it relates to this site. If that's not going to be the case, then just found that in the rules, so I thought I'd put it out there for everybody. I guess part of the clarification that I am seeking is there's some vagueness. I know there's a committee or something we're going to be going over the council rules again, but
We've had it, and it should have been done last month, but we've been dealing with this homeless issue that's taking up the time.
So maybe are things stated in an agenda? Do those count as council rules? Because right now there's nothing in the council rules that states that someone has to sign up ahead of time or a time or manner, place for speaking publicly. That's just in the agenda items. Nothing stated in here. We do have a restriction on public hearings and appearance of interested citizens where you have to state your name and address. So I was going to make a suggestion that, maybe we understand the reason why we're having that done, and if it works for those reasons, maybe state whether you're a resident, like inside the city limits or not. If that's the criteria, then it maybe safeguards people from threats against them or people coming and finding them. And the other is there's reference to parliamentary, basically saying you shouldn't be evoking the finer points of parliamentary procedure frivolously. I'll just use my word there. And that made me wonder, is that a reference to Robert's rules? Does that mean that if that's the reference, then Robert's rules do apply and all of them in the 12th edition actually apply? So I just wanted to seek some clarity on that. In addition, I guess I'll give a report from the Lane Economic Committee meeting today. We had a good presentation from Onward Eugene, which is doing a lot of work in economic development space between job training, career training, leadership training. They work outside of just Eugene, this whole region, and have been instrumental. They've taken over for RAIN Eugene, so they do the entrepreneurship incubator type work, and have kind of absorbed a number of other organizations in Eugene that were developing tech space, a number of different spaces, and are the training arm for the on-the-job training programs with the Lane Workforce Partnership. So say someone needs to get retooled to to be able to be, put into a new career, they could go into this program, contact Onward Eugene. There's basically grants through them available that will pay the employer to bring them on and tool them up and get them back in. So a lot of opportunity there for people out of work or wanting to have a career change. I was going to ask it in the last one, but update on the perfection of water rights. That kind of triggered my thought on where are we at. I know we talked about it before, but have those been secured? Is maybe update on that. I wanted to ask Riley what the status of the Emerald Ash Borer and its effect had been. I know she came in either a year or so ago, and it was a big looming issue. I wonder if it hit us, what effect did it have, how can we mitigate, did we lose all the ash trees? Also have a question, maybe this will come up later, but as to the definition of public property, unfortunately didn't get to the Oregon Revised Statute that was referenced in the RF. Well, I guess I'll just skip that one until we're back on the work session. That's enough.
Councilor Fleck.
So yes, that is Robert's rules. Parliamentary procedure is Robert's rules, and we have always adhered to them, but there is a lot of minutia with Robert's rules that, oh my gosh, I mean, I certainly don't understand, all of the depths of it. But as you were mentioning about somebody who voted in the affirmative changing their vote, that is Robert's rules as well. So that is basically we're saying we're going to use that as a general procedure, but not down to the nitty gritty of every little motion. That's why quite often up here I will say somebody will talk about tabling an item, and under Robert's rule that becomes a very complicated process, which we would try to avoid up here because of that. City manager is actually really good and usually has a copy when we get into the situations. But I fully also support our re-evaluating those council rules. I definitely want to have public input. That's, we were talking about reducing barriers, for our unsheltered folks. And I think we need to try to do the same for folks who want to speak to this body. With that, I want to thank the lady in the audience who, called me out for losing my temper last meeting. And I did, absolutely, and I really do apologize. It's interesting as a person of faith when somebody challenges you on your faith. It's amazing how quick it hit my hot button, and I do apologize because that is not what we're taught. Absolutely. And so I do apologize. This has been very tough. This is not an easy thing to do. I do truly believe that this is the best course for our town. Is it perfect? Is it going to solve every problem? Absolutely not. But I do think it's a good first step. I think it allows us to keep folks out of our parks, and at the same time try to offer some way to get folks back into mainstream society. So I do that. I will say another item that does get my hot button too is when my integrity is questioned. I'm not a perfect guy, but I do not lie. And that's another one that, for the life of me, Councilor Soulsby, I've tried to think about what it was we were talking about, because I fully believe I said something that to the effect that I wouldn't say this in public. That being said, I just absolutely believe this is the right path, and I would not support it if I didn't, regardless of whether it impacted my job or not. Our job up here is to make tough decisions for you, for the people in our community, not for us. And I really always do try to do that, whether folks agree or not. What I would ask at this point is a decision's been made. It's not a popular one, but I think let's give it a chance. I think let's see if this works. Let's put in the stop measures to say if it's not, that we'll stop it. Right now, we have the opportunity to try something that, from everything I've read, and I put a lot of time in this. I don't know if everybody heard the comments about the city manager meeting with providers of social services for the last 2 or 3 years, talking about this issue, trying to come up with measures that will work for our community. And I've been part of that. And so I have paid a lot of attention to this issue. I've read a lot of material. And I'm sure there's other material out there that does not support these issues. I respect people's right to disagree. I certainly welcome folks coming to the podium and stating that they don't agree. But I do have concerns when I hear folks say, well, no citizens support this, because clearly there are a lot of folks at our town hall that did. Clearly I do. I'm also a citizen. I pay our taxes, which are substantial. I mean, our city's taxes are definitely up there, and so burden on the same low-income folks that we're, wanting to help. So this is very, very tough situation. I don't expect us all to agree, but I do hope that we can try to have civil discourse, that we can stop making personal character assassinations, and that we can try to remain calm. And for my part, I apologize. If I've been snarky, if I've been curt, if I lost my temper, I apologize. And I guess what I request back is let's have those conversations in a positive manner, and let's try to get somewhere. The decision's been made. There have been many decisions up here I voted against and then turned around and supported. It was mentioned to me the other day, the Armory. I actually voted against purchasing the Armory. I tend to be fiscally on the conservative side of the fence, and I was worried about the city's budget in that sense. But once we have it, which I absolutely wanted to see it developed, I just didn't want to see the city doing it. But now that we have it, I feel it's my responsibility to support the development of that piece of property. There are many other issues that the streeteries that I voted against, and certainly in that case was pleasantly surprised that the staff really did an incredible job making this a very positive attribute for our community. So I guess what I'm asking is that let's give this a chance. Let's continue to have discussions about how to mitigate concerns. Councilor Urban, I would love to sit down in a subcommittee with you to draft a letter that I think we both can come up with. I fully know that both of us could put our heads together and come up with something that is very positive, that reflects the values that you're hoping, while still implements the positive message that I'm hoping for, and I'm sure we can do that. So I would really welcome that. And so I just want to ask for patience and your forgiveness. So thank you so much for listening, and please keep coming back. Thank you.
Councilor Soulsby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I need to address something now, Mike. I was hoping that we would just let that go, but now that you've brought it up again, effectively by saying that you're not lying about it, you're calling me a liar. So I do have to address that. That was actually not the first time you said that to me. And it was during the whole warming shelters. And I had heard through the grapevine when the city was thinking about purchasing the warming shelters that our city manager had planned to do a permanent homeless camp with it. And so if I was going to be voting on it for a warming shelter, I needed to be sure that that was not his ultimate plan, because that's not where I was going with it. And so I made an appointment and went to his office to talk to him about that. And so that's what we were talking about at City Council. And you were quiet about it, Councilor Fleck, but then that was a Monday, City Council. On Tuesday morning, you showed up at my business and walked in and asked me if you could talk to me for a second. And you said that you actually did agree, same comment that you said to me up here after the meeting that I was referring to. And you said that you agreed with a lot of things I was saying, but because of your job, you could not say it publicly. So when you told me at the council meeting that you agreed with a lot of the things that we were talking about, but that you were afraid of losing your job if you agreed with us publicly. I was not trying to do any kind of character assassination. I truly thought you may have a conflict of interest. I didn't want the city to put ourselves in a bad situation, and that is why I called it out. It had nothing to do with the character assassination, so I needed to set that record straight. What Councilor Irvin was speaking about was interesting to me, the thought of revisiting, what was the wording on that?
You can reconsider a motion.
Reconsidering. And I believe that what that entails is that we agree to reconsider the homeless camp, and it would have to be done at this meeting if that were to happen, for us to reconsider. I still am of the understanding, belief, that we did not have enough information. We were not even given the RFP, and now we are being told that we have to be in a hurry to come up with all the wording on this RFP and get it out there. And honestly, I feel like this is something that should not be rushed. This is something that we need to give serious consideration to. And I think it's something that we really should. I mean, we were told that if we didn't do it, that we were going to be, well, first of all, we were told that Blake versus Grants Pass, that city was being sued and we're in a lot of trouble. And I read the conclusion of that one, that actual case, and it actually said the opposite, that the city, it says the holding in this case does not say that Grants Pass must allow homeless camps to be set up at all times in public parks. Just like in Martin, the holding is in no way dictates the local government must provide sufficient shelter for homeless or allow anyone who wishes to sit, lie, or sleep on the street or at any time or any place. It goes down on the bottom to say, moreover, this holding does not limit Grants Pass ability to enforce laws that actually further public health and safety, such as laws restricting littering, public urination, defecation, obstruction of roadways, possession of distribution of illicit substances, harassment, or violence. Grants Pass would retain a large toolbox for regulating public space without violating the Eighth Amendment. I was also under the understanding that if we didn't make our homeless camp, which I was bringing up to our city attorney, which last time could not give me a clear definition of what low barrier meant. And I was being told that we had to allow drugs and alcohol. And it turns out that is not the case. And so I feel like this was pushed through for us to follow through with a low barrier site. And I just think it's wrong the whole way that this was done to us, and it's continuing to be done to us. No disrespect. I know you're doing a job, but I feel like this is our job, and we have a responsibility to our citizens up here. And I think we should reconsider. And I do not understand what this huge rush is all of a sudden when this law does not even take effect for over a year from now. That's going to hold us to anything. So why not take our time and talk this out? This makes no sense to me why we're rushing this. When, look around, I mean, the homeless camp that was visited in Sutherland, I mean, that's minimal. And, so I'm not saying that we necessarily won't come to the same conclusion, but I am saying we should take a stronger look at this, is the way I feel. I feel like this is, look around, look at what the citizens are saying. I'm getting emails like crazy. People are stopping in my business. That's why it gets so passionate out here, is people are upset. They're calling their own private meetings. I think we should reconsider.
Councilor Roberts.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying. When I heard people talk tonight, I took little bits and pieces out of it, and it seemed they wanted more of a program like the one I went through, one of accountability, one of true counseling, one that actually benefits the community. I'm very scared to death of this low barrier. I am. See, because, and I respect Mike Fleck and everything he's done for the services he's done, but I lived it. I lived it, Mike. I was in the trenches. I know what it's like out there. And I really feel when we go back those 3 years, I wanted to be involved in those conversations. And I've been told for the last 3 years that I can't be part of that I was to help sell the policy. You know, that's what I was told. Sorry, but that's what I was told. You know, I'm hurt with the way this, I really feel I want to do something. And I also said 3 or 4 times for us to do something different and bold, something that would change and show the rest of this great state how to do it. Cottage Grove is known for stuff like that. And that's what I want to see happen. I really don't feel we are what we're doing here. I have a funny feeling this train is going to come off the tracks, you know, and I'm scared to death of that. So, and the other thing I want to say, you know, because of the stuff that is happening, don't forget the vote all the way across the board, because a lot of this stuff that we're going through is coming out of Salem. I feel so. We need to change a lot in order to get things going. So, had a lot more to say, but I'm just tongue-tied right now. I'm hurt. I'm emotionally hurt over this whole process.
Councilor Savage.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I want to apologize. There was something that I said 2 weeks ago that I think was taken out of context, and so I want to clarify. We were talking about mowing lawns, and I made the suggestion of providing business names with the letter, and my intention was not to promote small businesses. My intention was to help the citizens of Cottage Grove, and so I apologize if that was taken out of context. I was one of the yes votes. It is very clear to me that we are not done talking. And I personally am on board with Highway 99. But I can't not hear the people around me. I think we need to keep talking. How do I recall that?
Make a motion to reconsider that action.
Can I make a motion to reconsider this action?
Councilor Fleck.
So I'm trying to remember, under Robert's rules, Councilor Haskell years ago put us in a position where we almost couldn't get out of it. And this seems like we're going down that road again. And so I just want to make sure that we're clear on the ramifications under Robert's rules.
Yeah, in doing a reconsideration, then the vote would have to, you'd have the vote on whether to reconsider, then you'd have a vote on the action again.
And if we don't do it, it takes a unanimous vote to make a change. Because it seems to me that's what happened to us before. And it was on the water issue back in the early 2000s, and we almost got stuck where we couldn't do anything because we now had to have a unanimous vote to make any change.
If I may, that section is section 18 of our rules, and it is a little bit ambiguous, but the fact that it says once a matter has been reconsidered, no motion for further reconsideration shall be made without unanimous consent of the entire council. So my reading of that was that if a motion is made, it gets reconsidered once, essentially, and then if you want to reconsider again, then you have to have a unanimous decision. But my understanding of it is if you simply make a motion, one person in the majority vote can make the motion, and it needs to be reconsidered.
I just caution the council that we could end up in a place where we're doing nothing on this matter. And I think that is far worse than the direction we're going. I would much rather have Well, I'll stop there, but I think it's a risky road we're going down.
Could you expound on the risk?
Well, if we get to the situation, I mean, you've seen how many hours it took us to get to a 4-3 split. Councillor Stinnett's not here, so effectively we're not including his voice in this decision, which is pretty opportune for the folks who are against this item. And I'm not suggesting that's the motivation, but the problem is once we get into a situation where now it's been reconsidered, whatever the outcome is, and let's assume it's a 3-3 vote, and I'm assuming that would mean it wouldn't pass. I
We
guess
don't have to
Robert's
reconsider
rules
it
gets
now.
really complicated. So this is where I'm worried that we're going to be in a position where we can no longer vote unless all of us agree. And clearly that has not happened so far in this.
I don't think we're saying that we would reconsider it right now. We wouldn't want to exclude Stinnett from this.
We're just agreeing to
Reconsideration.
reconsider it and go over it again, and
Once
with
it-
all the facts.
Once again, with Robert's rules, that's a slippery slope.
It's like the motion with the table. When you table it, it's got to be, that person has to bring it off the table to bring it back, and it could die
Otherwise
right
it
there
lives there
if you
forever.
put it on a table.
Robert's rules is complicated. That's all I'm saying.
So is this issue, and this is the only meeting that we have this opportunity to reconsider. Once this meeting's gone, with Robert's rules, it's over. And the way that this happened in such a rush, I believe that we need to reconsider this. I would make the motion.
You can't.
You cannot.
I did. Second.
So then we have a motion with a second to reconsider. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. So now what, Richard?
Now we go through the reconsideration.
I would move that we hold the reconsideration, not tonight, but at the subsequent council meeting.
And that takes a unanimous, correct?
Any way to get our city attorney on the line?
That's what it should be.
Mr. Boone?
Mr. Mayor, I read my reconsideration section. I ran to my office and grabbed my copy. The reconsideration section is rather thick, so this is probably not something we can reasonably have an answer for you on in the next, few minutes. It's and it's small text too, so it's lots of information. So it may take some time to get the answer you're looking for.
Okay. I'm going to take a 5-minute recess.
Can I say, with this whole thing, my problem is I will not be at the next meeting. I might be able to chime in on virtually, but I am out of town at the next meeting.
Okay. We're going to take a 5-minute recess.
Okay.
No, this is all it says.
Yeah. And any time that you put, go ahead and get my attention and get clarity. So. Just say, Mr. Mayor.
You're not clear. Speak. Because that's your job, and it's our job to make sure that it's clear.
And here's the list. If you want that.
Yeah, I want to try to not get into that space.
There's been a motion to reconsider. It's been, and it's passed. What do we do now? Correct. Correct.
Well, so I remember because I had read the entire motion. John said, let's just amend that motion to say that we're going to do the Morgan Over shelter at that site as they were doing.
So if it fails,
and then we can't go back without a unanimous vote. Then we can't go back without a unanimous vote. So, sorry.
That's the last meeting. That's the.
Yeah, and so I read
So
this, and then John amended it to say all of.
Oh,
thank you. Okay, thank you. I'll just put it right there. Yeah, perfect.
I don't need it, so you can do whatever.
I can give you the stuff.
I've got last meeting pulled up for Mike for the.
But we have the motion.
Right.
So we have
He
that.
read. He gave it off what was recommended with amendment.
And
I would let Mindy go
yeah,
first.
Mindy's got it from the minutes, so she's going to pull that out in the
If
minutes.
she's got it, let's let her do it. That way it's impartial.
Is Carrie back on? Is she?
She's not yet. She's having problems from home getting on. So, but I've got her responses here. So.
Okay. Are we ready? Just let me know when. I think he's got it.
So basically, in our last.
Okay, hold on. We're going to come back out of recess. Okay.
So basically, my motion originally was that the city council approve a plan to help address homelessness in Cottage Grove by authorizing the development of the city's property at 2205 Highway 89 as a low barrier shelter location to assist in addressing homelessness in the community, which will include the reimbursement for the property to the street STC fund, soliciting proposals for the management and operations of a low barrier shelter, supporting the continued temporary location of the 8 campsites at the community center and the 5 campsites at City Hall until completion of basic improvement at the low barrier site in early June, and working with Homes for Good to pursue the development of low income housing in the city's property at 443 North Douglas. At that point, Councilor Stinnett made a friendly amendment to just change the motion so that it stated that we were just going to do a low barrier shelter at the 99 site. So that was the motion that was originally made, and a friendly amendment accepted, and that was the motion that passed on a 4-3 vote.
Councilor Urban.
Yeah, that was, I was trying to find that all week and it wasn't posted anywhere and I couldn't, nobody remembered. Are you reciting that off of memory or?
It's off the agenda last.
So I read the agenda.
I'm sorry, they're friendly.
So the agenda I read, that was my original motion, and then I'm going through my memory that Councilor Stinnett had made it a friendly amendment that I agreed to change it just to doing the shelter at the 99 site.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I spaced out when he was making that amendment.
So is that your motion tonight?
So that is the motion that then is on the table as a result of the reconsideration.
Okay. And do we have a second?
There doesn't need to be a second because
okay.
That's already passed.
Okay, so we vote on this.
Yeah.
So, and just for clarification, when this fails, it will take a unanimous vote to revisit this issue at all.
Yes.
Again, ever. So this is off the table.
So point of information, essentially what is happening right now is you're going to make that motion again.
No, it's already there.
We just restated the motion because the reconsideration already put that motion on the table.
So if this motion fails, tonight,
we're done.
It takes the whole council unanimously to bring the homeless camp back to the table.
Back to the table. It's done at that point. That's what I said with Robert's rules.
I mean, this is important, so I want to be clear about what's happening because I'm not exactly clear. What motion?
So the motion that got reconsidered from last meeting is now back on the table.
We're voting on it again.
So it's like it made last meeting tonight.
Point of information, where is it requiring that we vote on it tonight?
It's been put on the table. You voted to reconsider. It is now being reconsidered. It's on the table to do that motion.
Point of information, can I see from the rules where that necessitates that it be done tonight?
Because it has to be at the next meeting, it was reconsidered, so now it has to be done by Robert's Rules of Orders.
That's what I'm asking.
Once you reconsider, you've put that motion on the table. That new motion is on the table, and it's the item that takes precedence.
So, hold on, recorder.
I believe that Councilor Urban also made a motion to hold reconsideration to not be done at tonight's meeting, and there was no second. And that motion hasn't been addressed.
But according to Robert's rules, you can't do that. You have to reconsider it because the motion has been made and passed to reconsider it at this meeting.
So, point of information, can we have that section of Robert's rules read so that we're all on the same page?
Okay. And that's what the question was specifically to the city attorney. Can they delay the revote to the next meeting on the item being reconsideration? No, it's on the table. You cannot delay it.
Call the question.
Okay, so we are reconsidering the vote from the motion left the last meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Isn't that our vote? We're voting the same way we did last
Yes.
time? Yes, aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so the only way this can come back to the council is for everybody to be 100% on board.
So can I make a motion that the same item come back to the council? Why are you shaking your head no?
I didn't.
I'm sorry. Would it take a unanimous, all 7 councilors with it?
Well, unanimous of who's here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Come on.
I'd like to make a motion that we bring the same item back to the next council meeting for consideration.
I have a motion. Do we got a second?
Second.
Do we have 100% unanimous? All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay. You scared me for a minute.
This wasn't a power play.
Okay. No, that was just concerns of council. So is there any more concerns before we get to the city managers?
So, and I apologize. I really don't mean to have, disagreements in public. And, I'm just going to let it there and just say that clearly we don't remember the same things. And I'm hoping for the rapport on the council that we can just leave it that there was some misunderstanding. And I guess I also want to ask Councilor Roberts if he's inferring that I had anything to do with trying to persuade him one direction or another on this, because I guess that also concerns me. So I guess what I'm hoping, this has been very passionate. Let's just keep decorum. Let's not let it go any further. Thank you.
Okay, report from the city manager.
I have nothing.
Okay, so we don't have the attorney back on apparently. So we will go ahead. There's no items removed. We'll adjourn. Do we go back into our work session now, or we recessed it? So is it?
I would recommend we keep it in recess. I mean, there's no.
Okay. Okay. Good night, everybody.